Welcome again, everybody. Now we are going to start session number 6, which is going to be chaired by Francisco Santarremigia from AITEC. Francisco is a partner of the DIAMOND Project, and she's going to moderate this session. The floor is yours, Francisco.
Thank you very much, Francis. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session number 6 with title Data and Intersectionality, New Methods and Approaches. My name is Francisco. As Francis was telling, I am working in AITEC in Spain, and I will be the chair of this session. Data does not need any definition, but it's worthy to remind the definition of intersectionality, although it has been already done this morning. Intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how social and political identities of a person combine to create different modes of discrimination and privileges. With this concept in mind, the session will be divided in 2 blocks: data and intersectionality from a general perspective, and new methods and approaches for smart cards and autonomous vehicles. 4 works will be presented in the first block and 2 works in the second one. The first presentation, I see now Sofia with the camera switched on, with title Gendered Perceptions of New Mobility Services, belongs to Dr. Sofia Kalakou, who is assistant professor at ISCTEO Business School. She is director of BSc in Industrial Management and Logistics, works on transport planning and modeling, focusing on user experiences, integration of new technologies, and sustainability aspects. Sofia, remember that you have time until 12 o'clock, so we can leave some time for questions at the end of the session. The floor is yours. Thanks very much. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for all the organization of this event. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to present this work that we have done in the framework of TInnGO project that is analyzing perceptions of travelers on new mobility features. 4 people have worked on this, on the work you will see today, and we have had the essential contribution of the TInnGO Hub participants and our TInnGO online platform. I'm going to talk a little bit about the motivation behind this work, then the methodology we have followed, some basic information on the survey design and the statistics. Then I will talk about the results that we have and the designation of components on new features in mobility services, the perceptions of the travelers and what kind of differences we have identified. And then finally, our results will close with the presentation of some traveler clusters and conclusions. What has motivated this work? We have seen in the literature and in practice that needs of men and women may vary in mobility, but there is still not sufficient statistics on gender preferences that can help us better understand what characterizes the experiences of men and women. For example, past works have shown that there are differences in the time and space requirements of different genders and ages, or for example as well that the perceptions towards new technologies might vary. So the objective of this work has been the identification of features of future transport systems that could improve the mobility experiences of passengers with different socioeconomic characteristics. We collected information from different cities in Europe, and we analyzed this data through the means comparisons on the perceptions of new features in future mobility systems. We also conducted some principal component analysis to organize these new features that we analyzed into different groups. And then we saw what is the perception of respondents to these components, and we identified some clusters of travelers. We collected information in several cities, and today we're going to present the results for these three cities, Turin, Valencia, and Paris. We have followed an intersectional approach, as Lina explained earlier, for the TInnGO project. This means that we have collected the information on various socio-demographic aspects, the mobility behavior of the respondents, and their perceptions on new public transport features, and the perceptions of the respondents on shared and autonomous mobility aspects as well. So with this information, we managed to group all the features, the new features that we analyzed, into some principal components. And these were 5 components that actually represented changes that we can have in the public transport system, in the public transport user services, then perceived benefits that respondents understand on the use of autonomous vehicles, some concerns, and then changes we can have in shared services and mobility. But what are the differences of the travelers on how do they perceive these aspects? Are there any differences in this? We analyze the differences we can find in gender. And here we found that actually perceptions of travelers can vary in 2 of the components that we have identified. The first one was the public transport system. And here what we have seen is that men have appreciate more the provision of emergency telephones at bus stops and stations. At bus stops and stations, while women, on the other hand, appreciate higher the provision of special fares when they have multitasking days, the provision of reliable camera surveillance systems both in bus stations, stops, and inside vehicles, the provision of panic alarm buttons, again, both in stops, stations, and vehicles. Also, they have rated higher the provision of suitable connections that can enhance the boarding process to transport vehicles, and also they appreciate more the adjustment that the passenger can make to the routes according to the needs. One note on these results that we have is that when we analyze both gender and age, we see that young men, meaning men younger than 25 years old or 35 years old in some cases, they have significantly different perceptions on the analyzed aspects compared to all the other groups of respondents when we match age with gender. The second group where we found differences was the perceptions on autonomous vehicles. And here we have a clear pattern that men identify that they will use more productively their time. They would trust autonomous vehicles for their dependents to use them to move independently, and they would feel more comfortable in a vehicle that is autonomous. On the other hand, we see that women were more concerned to share their location and phone numbers. They didn't trust that much that the technology would be successful, and would have the opportunity to solve actual problems in transport. So we see that men have higher perceptions in positive aspects that autonomous vehicles could bring, while women are more concerned compared to them with the potential risks we can have. One note for this analysis here is also that among the 3 different cities that we analyzed, we saw that respondents in the city of Turin had a higher mean average in their replies compared to the other 2 cities, Paris and Valencia. And then after analyzing the differences between men and women, we wanted to identify what are the top features that they appreciate. And surprisingly, we saw that they were exactly the same, but in a different order. So women rated first. The highest rating they gave was on the provision of camera surveillance systems, both at stop stations and vehicles. And then they focus on the provision of special fares and the availability of schedule information and integration with multiple modes in a smartphone application. While men, they first pay attention to special fares and schedule information and integration, and then on the existence of surveillance systems. So we mainly see that the desired changes concern surveillance and the enhancement of multimodality. And these are both aspects, both of those aspects concern current transport systems and services. So this motivated us to go to the next step of our analysis, where we analyze specifically the features of public transport. And here we have designated 3 new components. For the changes that can be applied in public transport services, we see that the travelers have identified, based on the responses of the travelers, we have 3 components. The first one concerns the enrichment of current services, then customization of services, and then provision of more space. Based on the replies on these 3 components, we clustered our respondents in different groups, and we identified 4 traveler clusters. So the first one that you can see here would like to have changes in everything. More enriched services, customization in the services, and more space. This is why we call them the game changers. Then in the second group, as you can see, we have clearly an elimination of the desire for dedicated space, but we have a higher preference for enriched services and customization. This is why we call them the service and customization oriented travelers. In the third case, we see that these passengers are quite passive compared to the other clusters. They haven't shown that they would like to have changes in the transport system so that the service is improved. And we call them the gamekeepers since they don't show preference for changes. In the last case, we can see that we have the highest preference for enriched services and space dedication then at a lower level, but there is a lack of preference for customization. And this group was called the service and the space-oriented travelers. And now we wanted to see specifically what is happening within each of those clusters. So what are their characteristics compared to the other clusters? In the first cluster, in our game changers, what we saw is that we have a balanced mix of gender, so almost equal number of men and women within the cluster. 77% of the respondents have an average or above average income level. We see that there is high concentration compared to the other clusters of people between 25 and 44 years old, while we almost don't have any young people younger than 25. And out of all these respondents in this cluster, we see that 40% of them they have young dependents, so children of all the ages, and only 6% of them doesn't have accessibility to cars. So the existence of the dependents, the car availability might be reasons that are related to this preference and this request for better services at all the 3 levels that we have identified. This is why we think that the message of these people is that they want a redesign in all the service. Moving to the second cluster here, we can see that we have again a balanced mix. Here we have a little bit higher percentage of people that are below the average is 30% in this case. We have many young people here, the highest percentage of young people, 17%. And 20% of our respondents here have children, but the difference from the other clusters is that they have very few of them have very young small kids, 1 to 5 years old, 0 to 5 years old, and 50% of them, they have kids at the age of 10 to 16, which might justify this decrease in the requirement for space and increase for enriched services. The highest percentage of car accessibility is in this, the lowest percentage of car accessibility is in this group. And also, we have the highest percentage of students. The message of this group is that they have their space, but what they need is enriched services and customization in the services. In the third case of the gamekeepers, we see that here is the only cluster where we don't have a balanced mix of men and women. We have more men participating, included in this group. 30% are below the average income. We have, again, high concentration of people at the age group of 34 to 55, and 25 of them have dependents, again, of all the ages. 10% of them don't have accessibility to cars. And in this case, we see that we have the highest participation of the respondents in tourism, while in the other clusters, we have a balanced participation of the 3 cities. The message of this group is keep everything as it is. In the fourth case, in this last cluster, we have our service and space-oriented respondents, where we have a balanced participation of men and women. Here we have the highest percentage of people with lower income, 50% of the respondents in this cluster. When we also have the highest percentage of people above 55, 30% of them, they have dependents, kids as dependents, and 50% of those are children under 5 years old. We can justify as well this space requirement that we can see. 7% don't have accessibility to car, and what is different also in this cluster compared to the others is that we see that we have a much higher percentage compared to the other clusters of people who hold technical degrees outside higher education, and we also have the highest percentage of self-employed and unemployed people. The message of this group to operators and planners is that they have the flexibility that they need in their mobility, but they need more enriched services and more space in public transport. To conclude, some major conclusions we have made are that what can serve better mobility for everyone. We saw that we have cameras, surveillance, and multimodality as requests both from men and women in a different order. And then we saw that based on the socioeconomic characteristics of the people, we can have different requirements. And these different requirements can be expressed by these results we have here. So 33% of the respondents want to keep the system as it is, while 36% of the respondents want to change everything. And the rest, 31%, would like to have in-between solutions. Out of all those, we see at an aggregated level that 67% of all the respondents desire enriched services and customization, and 47% of them desire more space in public transport for specific traveler needs. Thank you very much, and I would like to hear your comments and questions.
Thanks very much, Sofia. Thanks for this interesting presentation. Now I give the floor to the second presentation. This will be provided by Cristian and Adorean. The title is Analyzing the Mobility Patterns of Urban Transport Users in 5 European Cities. Cristian is working in VTM, Consultores en Ingeniería y Planeamiento. Is currently He is currently conducting his PhD in urban studies, and he's involved in projects of public transport and urban mobility, mainly centered on regional diagnosis and spatial analysis, territorial modeling, geocomputing, transport system planning, and transport networks design. Cristian, the floor is yours. Try to be to summarize the maximum you can, and try to finish at 12:15, more or less. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, and we can hear you perfectly. Thanks.
Okay. Good morning to all. First of all, we would like to thank the coordinators of the TInnGO project and also the organizers of this conference for the opportunity. The conference and the presentations themselves have been very interesting, and we still have one day of presentation. That's very good. During the next few minutes, I and my colleague will present a short part of the TInnGO's Work Package 7 results. To be more accurate, we will highlight the mobility patterns of 5 of the 10 hubs included in the TInnGO project. Our presentation is divided in 6 individual parts. Firstly, we will present the research questions. Secondly, we will explain the methodology. Further on, we will highlight the main results of the empirical part, and then we will close the presentation by indicating the main conclusions. The research questions we have addressed were the next ones. What are the differences between women's and men's mobility patterns? The second one, are gender and age influencing the time spent and the distance traveled? And the third one, are gender differences influencing the satisfaction levels regarding the use of public transport? The conceptual framework consisted of 3 main stages. The first stage involved the development of a Python code used in order to extract the origin and destination coordinates of the most frequent trips. Next on, we geocoded the origin and destination points and created zones by using the neighborhood or parish limits for each hub under analysis. In this way, we obtained not only the aggregated origin and destination flows, but also the distances and time spent by respondents on their most frequent trips. In the second stage, we analyzed the mobility patterns by gender. For this purpose, we created a database with the validated survey data that served as input for the descriptive statistics. This part allowed to draw the mobility patterns for both women and men in each hub under analysis. The third section has assessed the mobility satisfaction level with the existing public transport services. Besides the survey data, we collected also information about the transport networks, travel costs, types of tariffs, and existing discounts for specific groups. And then we used all this information as input for each hub mobility model, while the variables included in the analysis were the age, level of education, ethnicity, origin, and income. The data used in this research is part of a wider survey disseminated online in the 10 European hubs belonging to the TInnGO project. Nevertheless, in this research, we only included five of the respective hubs, namely the Italian, Greek, Spanish, French, and the Portuguese hubs. The data from Paris, Torino, Thessaloniki, and Valencia was collected from November 2020 until February 2021, while in Lisbon, the answers were collected between April and August this year. Regarding the analysis of the origin and destination of the most frequent trips, a tendency was observed in all the 5 hubs. The main destination in each case corresponds to the main city centers, while the spatial distribution of the trips do not follow the urban centers' administrative limits. A big concentration of trips is performed from the suburban areas, the urban centers, while no correlation has been found between women's and men's origins and destinations. And this happens in all the hubs analyzed. This analysis has also permitted to compare the distances and time spent by each gender on the most frequent trips. And the results are very interesting. For example, in Lisbon, Paris, and Thessaloniki, women travel higher distances, while in all the 5 hubs, younger women travel longer average distances than the other age groups. In the case of men, for example, the working age groups normally travel longer distances. On the other side, the men's trips in the French hub have the highest average distances. Concerning the trip's duration, in general, women travel shorter distances to work, but they take longer to complete their most frequent trips due to the transport modes they use, but also because of the number of stops. On the contrary, in the French, Greek, and Spanish hubs, the men belonging to younger and older age groups normally spend more time than women to complete their most frequent trips. And now I will let my colleague Juan to present the remaining parts of this of our presentation.
Okay, thank you, Cristian, for the good presentation. Are you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, good morning to everyone. And following the presentation, mobility patterns also were comparing the trip purpose with the modes choice, finding general aspect for all of them. As you can see in the following figures, the right side shows the result for men and the left side shows the result for women for each hub, where the orange color represents the use of the private car being the primary mode of transport used by both gender for all 3 purposes, following by the public transport represented by the color blue color, and following by the by walking and cycling. So it is possible to conclude that public transport is more used to commute between home to other purpose by women, as well as walking is used majority by women also. Regarding men, it is possible to conclude, as already described above, that the private vehicle is the primary mode of transport used by men for all 3 purposes. Also, we can state that cycling levels are low, and there is not a clear trend about who uses it the most. In general, the results show a preference for more traditional modes, private vehicles, and public transport, while the use of shared bicycle and shared modes is not yet relevant, at least for these hubs under analysis. Next, please. On the other hand, we also analyze mobility patterns regarding trip interruption and the reason of this interruption. The following table show that, as expected, men usually conduct their trips to any purpose without interruption, as you can see in the table. So when we analyze the reason of this stuff, which are shopping, leisure, activity related to job or academic, health, and dependence on difference were found, as you can see in the red circles. So yes, okay. On the other hand, the research also analyzed mobility pattern regarding travel with dependence, and also we will expect women travel more with dependence than men, except for the Italian and Portuguese hub, where men travel more with dependence than women. So as you can see in this table, and also already described, private car is the mode of transport more used for travel with dependence, except for the French and Spanish hub, which prefer to use the walking for travel with their dependents. Well, concerning a mobility satisfaction model, and as Cristian described in the methodology section, the level of agreement with the state and public transport suite my mobility needs was assessed separately for men and women in order to identify the aspects that affect the perception of each segment. So the analysis showed the following findings. For the Italian hubs, only men's perception toward public transport was affected in a negative way by the commuting by bicycle, and also in a negative way by the acquisition of car. More cars, lower satisfaction, and in a positive way by average income. In this case, the model for women was not reliable. So for the Spanish hub, also, only men's perception toward public transport was affected in a negative way when traveling with elderly dependents, and in a positive way when commuting by public transport. And also in this case, the model for women was not reliable. So for the Lisbon hub, next slide, please. For the Lisbon hub, the income level affected in a positive way to men and in a negative way to women, low income. And men with kids at the age from 0 to 5 years old present low satisfaction, and from 6 and 10 years old all have higher satisfaction. On the other hand, regarding women with no dependence show more satisfaction, and was as well as when commuting in public transport, while older women and women with a lower income are less satisfied. So in general, in most of the cities, only women's perception toward public transport was affected by all in a negative way for the presence of dependence, acquisition of car, resident location, and accessibility to a bicycle. Well, and finally, some conclusion and discussion. Women travel a short distance to work, but take longer to complete their journeys, and overall preference for traditional modes, for example, private car and public transport by both genders. And also the use of a private or shared bicycle is not yet prevalent. And also the use of shared modes is also not yet prevalent among the hubs also under analysis. And finally, mobility satisfaction model have indicated that women are normally less satisfied with the existing transport service. So therefore, mobility policy should consider a woman's particular need to achieve more equitable transport and mobility solution. Thank you very much for your attention. And if anyone has a question, feel free to ask us.
Yes, thanks, Juan and Cristian. We have at the end of the session, we have a slot for questions and comments. Okay, thanks very much. And now we go to the third presentation. In this case, is for me. I am naval engineer with a PhD in transport infrastructure and transport systems. I am the CTO and founder of AITEC, and I am assessor, consultant, and researcher in the transport sector for more than 20 years, and currently working on inclusion and corporate social responsibility protocols in the transport sector. Let me show my screen. I have time until 12:30, more or less. Please, can anyone confirm me that you can see my screen, my presentation?
Yes, we can see.
Francisco?
Yes.
But we need you to turn your camera on.
Yes.
So, I can see you.
Okay, thank you.
But perhaps sorry. Now it's better. It's a problem of the size, I think.
I can see your slides and I can see your camera,
Okay.
your chat too, so that's fine.
Okay, perfect. So it's fine. So the title of my presentation is a methodological approach to reveal fair and actionable knowledge from data to support women's inclusion in transport systems, the DIAMOND approach. I will start with a brief description about the methodology of DIAMOND, which can be described in 9 steps. Okay. In the first step, we define a use case by choosing one vertex and one layer in the representation of the transport system introduced by diamond with the shape of the inclusion diamond. For example, the use case 1 about railways and public transport will be generated by choosing the vertex 1 and the layer 3. By choosing other vertices and layers, we can generate use cases in a structured and systematic way to address the fairness for all the transport system in the present and in the future. In a second step, we identified factors about inclusion through a scoping literature review and focus groups, and we defined a hierarchical model by clustering all these factors in 3 levels. This was done through a statistical analysis about the number of times that a factor was mentioned in the literature jointly with other factors. The publication in an open access indexed journal where these hierarchical models and the statistical analysis can be consulted is highlighted in the red square. In the step number 3 of the methodology, at least one recommendation was generated and validated per each factor about inclusion in the level 3. Recommendations were generated by 3 sources: workshop with external experts, the interdisciplinary panel of Diamond, and members of the association WAVE. Finally, all these recommendations were validated through surveys by at least 5 experts and with more than 80% of positive votes. In a fourth step, the methodology requires the selection of a profile by choosing several phases in the polyhedral individual, introduced by Diamond to represent users and employees in the transport system. For example, women with low incomes and older than 45. With all the data collected during the data collection campaigns of the project for this use case and this profile, the methodology identifies the top 10 factors level 3 about inclusion for this specific profile. Generate a self-assessment questionnaire addressed to service providers and employers, provides a fairness score for the service provider or employer on the basis of answers from this self-assessment questionnaire, an impact assessment based on equity, effectiveness, and efficiency is carried out, and finally, a list of priority recommendations is suggested to the service provider and employer to improve the fairness. Let's see how this methodology is applied in practice. Regarding the step 1 about the selection of the use case from the inclusion diamond, this was already predefined by the project. 4 use cases with their goals were established. Use case 1 about railways and public transport, which goal is to increase the number of women using the railways in peak and off-peak hours. Use case 2 about autonomous vehicles, which goal is to increase the acceptance level of autonomous driving by women. Use case 3 about bike sharing, which goal is to increase the percentage of women using the bike sharing system. And use case 4 about employment, which goal is to increase the percentage of women in on-site and off-site job position. Regarding the step 2 about the identification of factors about inclusion and the definition of hierarchical models, these are the factors about inclusion identified and clustered in 3 levels for the use case 1 about railways and public transport. These are the factors about inclusion identified and clustered in 3 levels for the use case 2 about autonomous vehicles. These are the factors about inclusion identified and clustered in 3 levels for the use case 3 about bike sharing systems. These are the factors about inclusion identified and clustered in 3 levels for the use case 4 about employment. Regarding the step number 3 about the generation and validation of one recommendation per each factor about inclusion, one recommendation is associated to each factor level 3. In relation to the step number 4, about choosing the profile of women to be assessed regarding the fairness, this is done by filtering the sociodemographic characteristics from the data collected during the data collection actions, based on dynamic argumentative Delphi surveys and user and employee satisfaction surveys, USC surveys. In relation to the step number 5 regarding the identification of top 10 factors level 3 about inclusion, this is done through a weighted hierarchy of factors level 3. To get this, first we calculate local weights of factors level 1 and 2 through the analytic hierarchic process with data from the DAD surveys. Then we get the local weights of factors level 3 from a Bayesian networks analysis on the data from USC surveys, observations, and datasets. Local weights of factors level 1, level 2, and level 3 are multiplied to get the final weights of factors level 3. Finally, these weights of factors level 3 are ordered from higher to lower, and we choose the top 10 factors level 3. All these calculations can be consulted in these 2 open access publications in indexed journals. The first one about weights of factors level 1 and 2 by applying the analytic hierarchic process, and the second one about weights of factors level 3 by applying Bayesian networks. Regarding the step number 6 about the generation of a self-assessment questionnaire for the service provider and the employer, one question per each top 10 factor about inclusion for the selected profile is generated. Per each of these 10 questions, there are 3 possible answers, corresponding to 3 levels of fulfillment with the recommendation associated to each top 10 factor by the service provider or employer, high, medium, or low level. This self-assessment questionnaire is generated for a specific profile and filled by the service provider for use cases 1, 2, and 3, or by the employer for the use case 4. In relation with the step number 7 about getting a fairness score for an organization regarding a selected profile, a fairness score of an organization for a specific profile of women is calculated by applying the Rush model. The Rush model provides a formula to calculate the probability to pass an examination with a difficulty D by a person with an ability A. In this case, we consider that the difficulty D to meet with the top 10 with a top 10 factor is represented by the weight obtained in the step number 5 of the methodology. This is the orange column. And the ability A of the service provider or employer is represented by answers from the self-assessment generated and filled in the step number 6. This is the yellow column. Weights representing the difficulty are corrected by linear interpolation. This is the blue column. This is done to get a similar magnitude order in difficulties, blue column, and abilities, yellow column. The Rush model formula represents the probability to meet with needs of users or employees belonging to a specific profile by the service provider or employer given its current capabilities. Regarding the step number 8 about the impact assessment based on equity, effectiveness, and efficiency indicators, each top 10 factor about inclusion for a specific profile has associated a validated recommendation to improve it. We suppose that after implementing this recommendation, the satisfaction of this top 10 factor is increased to the maximum score. On the other hand, all factors about inclusion are interconnected in a Bayesian network with a maximum likelihood. Consequently, the improvement of this factor will affect the satisfaction of the others. So the process is as follows. First, the satisfaction of a top 10 factor is increased to the maximum score. Then the probability of improving the score of the other 9 top 10 factors is estimated and added. This is the effectiveness indicator for a specific recommendation. And this is repeated for the other 9 top 10 factors in order to calculate the effectiveness for the other 9 recommendations. Finally, all this process is repeated, filtering the data for the same profile selected for women, but with gender equal to men. By doing this, we obtain the effectiveness indicator for women in the column A and for men, column B, per each recommendation associated to each top 10 factor about inclusion. On the other hand, the cost of implementing each recommendation was estimated. The equity indicator of a specific recommendation is the division between the effectiveness for women, column A, and the effectiveness for men, column B. The efficiency indicator of a recommendation is calculated by the division between the effectiveness indicator and the cost of implementing this recommendation. And finally, regarding the step number 9 about the selection of priority recommendations, the first criterion for the selection of priority recommendations is to choose those recommendations with equity indicator between 0.8 and 1.2. In this example, these ones are marked in a red square. In this way, good recommendations for women are chosen, but being sure that they are not bad for men in order to fulfill with the don't harm principle. A second selection criterion is applied to those recommendations chosen after applying the criterion 1. The second criterion for the selection of priority recommendations is to choose those with the highest efficiency indicator. For instance, the 3 highest ones. In this example, those marked in blue. And from all those recommendations chosen after applying criteria 1 and 2, the third criterion for the selection of priority recommendations is to choose those scored as low in the self-assessment questionnaire by the service provider or employer in the step 6 of the methodology. For example, the 2 ones marked in green squares. And these 2 recommendations will be suggested as priority by the methodology to the service provider or employer for a specific profile. Thanks very much. Okay, and now I leave the floor to the next presentation, the next presenter. Let me find the I think is Andrea, the next one. So Andrea, if you can switch on your camera.
Yep, you should be able to see my screen too. Can you confirm?
Yes, let me do your introduction because it's quite difficult to be presenter and chair in the same time. Okay. The fourth and last presentation of this first block with title Location-Based Data and His Analysis for the Study of the Women's Needs or as users of public transport, the Horizon 2020 DIAMOND Project, belongs to Dr. Andrea Gorrini from Systematica. Andrea is an environmental psychologist with experience in human behavior in transport systems. He is coordinating research and development activities related to the identification, collection, and exploitation of different mobility data sources that will allow to understand and address gender-specific needs. He is currently involved in the Horizon 2020 DIAMOND Project, and we can see your screen. Andrea, please go ahead. The floor is yours. Thanks very much. Be aware of the time, please.
Yep. I will try to make a presentation as brief as possible. By the way, thank you, Francisco, for your presentation, which allow me to skip some of the slides related to the overall methodology of the DIAMOND project. So today, the purpose of this presentation is to show you a preliminary analysis which was performed through location-based open data and GIS. And so very briefly, let me, yeah. So this is the, let's say, the topic we are going to talk today. And as a very general introduction, I want to highlight the overall objective of the DIAMOND project as related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So the aim of the project was to make public transport more accessible and inclusive, and let's say the COVID-19 pandemic, which made complicated, even more complicated to collect data during the project, highlight even more the need to do research about this topic, so to make the public transport more accessible. And in particular, today we are going to show an analysis performed on bike sharing service in the Paris region. So again, Paris, after the pandemic, became one of the most representative cities, investing lots of projects to make the cycling network more accessible for the city user. And yeah, so this is the overall picture of the methodology for collecting data applied by the DIAMOND project. So there was a preliminary set of activities called thematic analysis. Yvonne, Augustus, and Francisco this morning already introduced the scope of this preliminary analysis, which was devoted to define the factors which influence the accessibility and inclusiveness of public transport for women. And then we applied several methods for collecting and analyzing data. And today we are going to focus on structured open data. This methodology was applied to two of the use cases of DIAMOND. So the first use case, which was based on railway public transport in the province of Barcelona and in the Warsaw metropolitan area, and also on the third use case, which was focused on the bike sharing service in the Paris region. So you can see also the transport operator, which are partner of the consortium, and that were getting involved in collecting and analyzing data. So the data collection started from the definition of the fairness characteristics, which influence the level of inclusiveness of public transport for women, with a specific focus on the bike sharing services managed by Velib in the Paris region. So you can see that through the thematic literature review, the research group was able to define four main factors, related to the needs of women as users of bike sharing services: so accessibility and spontaneity, safety and security, social constraint, weather, and topography. So starting from the definition of these four main factors and the other related factors, we start collecting data defined as relevant, considering the needs and expectations of women. This is an example of the open data which was collected through the open repository and geoportal to analyze through GIS the city of Paris, trying to investigate the city characteristics and how they influence the accessibility of the services. So you can see we collect data related to the land use of the city, the position of point of interest, but also socio-demographic data related to the characteristics of the population in terms of age and gender, and other mobility data related to the availability of other public transport infrastructure and services in the Paris region. The scope of the analysis was to select a sample of relevant bike sharing docking stations among the total number of available docking station. So all the data were analyzed, produced a multi-layer map of the city, and then all the value of the indicators were normalized to be better compared from a statistical point of view. And then we start defining indexes which were weighted considering also the results of the thematic analysis. So through the thematic analysis, it was possible to select only the relevant indicator, but also to weight a few of them as most important among the others. This is a very preliminary map of the territory of the Paris region. You can see more than 1,300 docking stations are present in territory. So again, the scope of the analysis was to select only those which were more relevant for the project. So here we go very briefly on a series of maps showing, for example, the characteristics of the urban fabric and the localization of the point of interest. This is a heat map showing that the city center is characterized by higher density in terms of point of interest than the population density, also the density of the female inhabitants, also elderly inhabitants, and foreign. Then another heat map related to the density map of public transport available, and also the cycle network available for the citizen. So the main concept here was, after creating these indexes and also to look at the quantitative frequent distribution of the data, and the main concept is to select only the relevant docking station as mostly positive or negative in terms of their characteristics. So you can see this, for example, on the x-axis, all the docking stations characterized by the territorial data index, and then we start selecting only those belonging to the highest and to the lowest quantile. So this made possible for us to highlight the part of the city in which these relevant docking stations were located. Again, same procedure for the socio-demographic data and for the mobility data. So this is the workflow. We started from more than 1,000 docking stations. Then the validation process made it possible to select a part of this. And then we start analyzing data considering the distribution of the three main indexes we define: territorial, socio-demographic, and mobility indexes. And then the very end of the analysis, we select in total 20 docking stations, 10 positively, let's say, characterized by a positive values of indexes, and 10 as negatively characterized by the results of the analysis. And this is a map reproducing the position of all the docking stations. And hereby, instead, the position of the selected ones. So you can see here the results of the analysis. So these are the group of the positive, let's say, docking station. Here, the negative docking station. And this kind of analysis made possible also to characterize the docking station considering through proprietary data shared by the lead, to characterize them considering the number of female users using the infrastructure, using the docking station or the bike sharing services. So as a final remarks, the analysis location-based open data allow us to select a group of 20 relevant docking stations, which were then further analyzed through the overall methodology of DIAMOND, through on-site observation, survey question, and social media data. And all the results of this analysis have been already published. You can find here the open source, fully available paper, and I'm fully available for any comment and question. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Andrea. I think that your dog doesn't like your presentation. Eh?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So thanks, Andrea. Now we start with the second part of the session about new methods and approaches for smart cards and autonomous vehicles. The first presentation in this section part has the title, The Lure of Smart Cards, How to Analyze Gender and Diversity in Visual Car Branding. And the speaker is Dr. Hilda Rømer Christensen, who is Associate Professor and Head of the Coordination of Gender Studies at the University of Copenhagen. She's a member of the Committee for Welfare and Innovation at the Sino-Danish University Center in Beijing, and currently the scientific coordinator for the Horizon 2020 project TInnGO. She's involved in gender research committees at Nordic and European levels. She has written extensively on gender, culture, religion, welfare, and citizenship, and more lately on gender in transport in comparative perspective. Hilda, the floor is yours. Thanks very much. And please be aware with the time. In theory, you have time until 5 minutes past 1 or something like that. Thanks very much, Hilda. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Can you activate your micro?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see your screen. Thanks.
You can see me and you can see my screen. Oh,
exactly.
I'm relieved. I'm relieved. Yes, thank you for this opportunity to present a small case study, which is part of the TInnGO project. And as said, the title is The Lure of Smart Cars, Gender and Diversity in Visual Car Branding. And the case study has been conducted together with two research assistants, Louise Anker-Nexø and Stine Petersen. I can't move the.
Yes, I see your problem. You cannot move your slides. Perhaps you can put it in presentation mode and it will work, I think.
It is in presentation mode, I think.
Okay, so Fuentes, please, can you give support to Hilda?
Yeah, Hilda, you remember clicking on display settings?
Pardon?
Please click on display settings.
Displays.
Yes, up, the second option, up in the screen. You see, show taskbar and display settings. There, a bit more up, a bit upper.
Yeah.
There, you see the option? No, you in the top of your screen. There, click there. Display settings.
Yeah.
Okay, click there, please.
Yeah.
Don't worry. In the top of your screen, Hilda, you see the second option, display settings.
I see talking, I see everyone, I see webcam, I see screenshot. This is what you mean?
Hilda, press the escape tab.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay. And can't you move the slides by clicking on the arrows?
Can't do anything. Sorry. Jeg kan ikke noget nu. Jeg er på et.
Hilda, if not, we can move to
yes, we can interchange the presentation. Let's see if it's solved. Okay, let's see. Okay,
here we are.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
It's working now. Okay.
It's working now. Oh, I have.
Try to move. Okay. Sorry. Try to move to the third slide to definitively check.
Yeah. I try to stay here. Okay. Is it okay? Yeah. The motivation for this case study was two impulses. First of all, the widely circulated narratives of all the promises of upcoming smart technologies, as you see here, a quotation from a European car committee, smart mobility will bring massive gains in safety, cost reduction, and infrastructures, and vehicles will be used more efficiently and provide accessibility for all. And the other impulse was to look at smart mobility from a visual point of view, because we know that a lot of smart mobility, they are shown, we are met, smart mobilities, we are meeting them in visuals and images. And often these images are, as you can see here in Volvo's autonomous concept car from 2018, either they are depicted with very dark backgrounds, very seducing backgrounds, also night, urban night images, or in what I would call artificial natural contexts, which are of course not what we know from our urban life. So the aim of this study was to explore the visual analysis as a method in smart mobility studies, and notably to focus on how do car producers handle the issues of technology and equality, and also to focus on how gender, class, ethnicity in the branding of smart cars are visualized. And the two car companies we have looked into is Volvo, which you see on the upper image, and BMW on the other image here. And if you look, we have used YouTube channels and videos as data material, and if we start looking at how, when and how they have been launched by these car producers, we can see that BMW was first in 2006, and they have many more subscribers to their, both subscribers and viewers to their videos compared to Volvo. Fiat was also part of the case analysis, but I will focus on Volvo and BMW. And this also tells us a little bit about the branding, the images of these two car companies. So why did we choose the YouTubes? It's because they are purpose-made videos. They have a global accessibility, and they are commercials distributed to the masses. And also these YouTube videos, they form part of the new social media landscape, which also co-constitute human beings in human material interactions. So, I mean, all these images are, of course, not neutral. The YouTube video analysis in itself focused on the following: how do the companies present electric and autonomous cars, and how do the smart cars connect to the history and characteristics of the car brand? Second, how are the new models presented and visualized, and who is addressed in the videos in terms of gender, age, class, ethnicity, and locality? And how do the images meet the TInnGO concepts of gender smart mobility, which includes indicators, etc.? So many of the issues that are addressed here have also been addressed throughout this conference, but now they are addressed from a slightly different approach. So first, we take a look at the Volvo. The company was founded in 1927. It's known as a strong and safe car, and also a characteristic of the Swedish people's home, the elaborate welfare state. In the 21st century, Volvo has updated its brand. They promote themselves as Volvo for life. They address safety and security continuously in individual car mobility, and they also try to keep up with the Scandinavian characteristics of being a family and friendly, woman-friendly car. And here you see one of the earlier models, which was quite iconic, and there is already then a woman who went shopping there. If we compare the Volvo YouTube channels, we can see that they have their market shares probably also mirrors the viewers here. The US makes up a big market, takes a big market share of the Volvo, and of course Sweden, and then we have the upcoming economies, India, Poland also, and more lately also China. If we look at, and this is very brief now, look at the positioning of the Volvo electric cars, we can see that they do it in a naked and raw fractive and gray environment. The car take center stage. And the storytelling is rational, simple information, but here delivered by women experts, engineers, and other management, women who are in the management. And the focus is on the mechanics and how it's much more easy to drive this car. And the narrative which we end up with is it portrays the Volvo driver as a professional woman with a rational approach to cars. And at the same time, it's easier to handle. And the same goes for the autonomous car, which I'm not going into, but you can see the pictures here. In the pictures, the routinely business male is substituted by business women. And the question, of course, occurs, what does it matter? So all in all, we have the association map here of a Scandinavian design, safety and reliability, corporate gender equality, and a kind of solid, dull, middle-class car, which appeals to certain middle class, or is intended to appeal to middle-class consumers. When we look at the BMW, the picture is quite different, and the BMW have made a couple of very popular YouTubes, which I'm going to take a look at. The first one is here. The most popular is this on leadership and masculinity. It's called the Epic Drift Mob from 2014. And the narrative, I mean, the setting is modern urban area with admiring pedestrians on the sidewalk as audience, and the storytelling concentrates on 5 male drivers performing impressive drifting skills, and they drive very risky, but at the same time controlled. So the narrative is, it portrays the BMW as a person, a male who leads with power, risk-taking, while at the same time having the professional skill sets to control what others consider to be a dangerous situation. And I think there are some links to the risk-taking minorities we talked about yesterday. And also in the historical, here is a historical account in the small escape. And here the BMW, they gloss over their doubtful past because they delivered material, they produced for the Nazi regime, and they also used camp prisoners in their production. And here they sort of start a new history, the unification of Germany, and also the independent and strong males who drive their BMWs into this new world. And this brand image is also connected to the branding of the electric cars. There is a continuing focus on the leadership and responsibility, and as making a change, and also an emerging ethnic inclusion of ethnic minorities. So we have a different association map where, I mean, the BMW becomes an identity marker or a status symbol. So we have tried to confront these findings with the gender smart indicators, where we look into the indicators of being attractive, affordable, effective, sustainable, and inclusive in relation to intersecting agents. And it turns out to be not so simple an exercise. It's more, as said earlier by Jackie, we use the the TInnGO indicators turns out to be reflective indicators, because we have to discuss, I mean, what is attractive? These cars are attractive. Yes. Are they affordable? They are affordable for some middle-class people, but absolutely not for all. Are they effective? Somehow. Are they inclusive? No. Are they sustainable? And this is really an issue that can be taken further, because does an electric car mean a more sustainable mobility? That's the question. So the point in visual analysis is that the visual analysis can tell us something about what is presented in the image and stories, how is the visual represented, and who is represented and addressed. And one can also obtain knowledge on where are the gaps in the representations, and also identify certain potentials for change, and also the degree to which gender, ethnicity, sustainability are combined and included. And I would add to that the visuals here could be refined and include more responses, image illustrations. They could go deeper into the issues of corporate gender equality and women in STEM professions as presented by the Volvo. They could go deeper into issues of masculinity and the attraction to drifting and smart technology and aggressive driving, in opposition to the dull middle-class driver, which is, I think, important to consider. And they could go deeper into the paradox of the smart cars and climate politics and resource allocation. Smart cars, and this is really the point also, they produce new desires and affordances which support current car-centric society and create the need for more of the same. And this is all for me. And you can read the reports here, both this case analysis and also other related reports on which address visual analysis. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Hilda, for this interesting and concise presentation. You have been very in time. Thanks for this. And now is the time for the last presentation in this second block, with title Autonomous Vehicles, a New Opportunity to Gain Women Fairness, Main Results of the DIAMOND Project. This presentation will be presented or explained by Dr. Ricard Barberá from IBB, the Biomechanical Institute of Valencia. His background includes assistive technologies, accessibility, active aging, and gender mainstreaming. He has worked on projects dealing with the improvement of occupational health and prevention of occupational risk, applying a gender perspective. Ricard, the floor is yours, and remember that you have time until more or less 20 minutes past 1. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Please, Ricard, can you switch on the micro? Ricard, the micro, sorry. We can see your presentation and we can see you, but we could not hear you. Check now.
You can hear me now?
Yes, now yes. Thanks very much, Ricard. Go ahead. Thanks, the floor is yours.
So, in the automotive sector, human-centered design has traditionally been overshadowed by technology-led innovation. This, together with designs made for an average man, has raised serious issues affecting even safety for certain groups, notoriously women. Of course, you may say this is not exclusive of the automotive industry. However, this is a very worrying situation affecting already conventional cars, and if we don't remedy that, it will affect for sure future autonomous vehicles. It is in this framework that we see a new opportunity to gain human fairness and inclusion, reinforcing the idea of a convenient mobility adjusted to the passenger needs that is safe and comfortable for all. We will talk in this presentation about meeting the required needs, and your thoughts are right. Women and men have different needs. The discrepancy is also in the mobility pattern, or when we ask about preferred activities while traveling. The perception of the social benefits or the need of keeping control on the behavior of the vehicle are aspects contributing differently to the acceptance of autonomous vehicles when considering gender. Lastly, the knowledge generated in the DIAMOND project in the use case of autonomous vehicles has been the main input for the guide autonomous vehicles through gender perspective glasses. We need to understand the concept of convenience applied to autonomous vehicles as the quality at which the car meets the required needs of passengers, addressing them properly. We can explain quite easily the different needs and requirements of women and men if we base on, firstly, the physical and physiological diversity due to sex, with important mismatches between the needs and how the technology addresses them. For instance, no safety belts generalized for pregnant women so far, or higher risk of serious injuries in a crash for women in comparison to men. And secondly, the gender-based assigned roles as it happens with the differentiated patterns mobility. What differentiates the patterns of mobility of women and men is, firstly, the mobility of women are more complex, characterized by a combination of shorter and chain displacements required to perform different specific tasks. The mobility of care, mainly performed by women, may imply the displacement with children. Therefore, the design should consider the needs of children as passengers and look for comfortable spaces for children and their caregivers. And secondly, the use of different mobility modes, including walking. And last, women are more likely to suffer harassment situations in mobility. This fact is crucial when we consider autonomous vehicles as a potential shared service. The autonomous car, high or full automated, will not require the engagement of the passenger as a driver, or at least not the whole time. Therefore, the driver will gain some spare time to perform other activities. Are women and men willing to perform the same type of non-driving related activities? No. The complexity of trip chaining added to the workload of a double work shift some women are forced to do, it may be the reason behind the preference of women to maximize my time, understood as the need of using my time wisely, while the car is driving for me, and highlighted as a priority for women, while men prefer, let's say, taking things easy and thought on more relaxing tasks while they were traveling in autonomous car. So what can we do in terms of design new functionalities for autonomous vehicles? To improve non-driving related tasks, we need to gain confidence to allow a full driver disengagement, to facilitate interaction with other passengers, and to increase comfort. Autonomous vehicles should offer automated driving and non-driving functions, focus on chain displacement, strategies to avoid motion sickness or adaptation of the driving mode to different tasks. to design flexible configurations of interior layouts and settings. It's also important to incorporate specific features for different tasks and postures. For instance, adaptable seating or auxiliary surfaces, ambient comfort adjust to the task from a set of private and individual spaces to an open space, as well as electronic facilities for working or entertainment. We see different perceived attributes of autonomous vehicles considering control, understanding control by the belief one will have control over the vehicle behavior independently that he or she is driving or not the car. It is a priority for women to be improved because women have a low perception of control, and for them is notoriously more important than for men. This was obtained asking to a group of women and men that participated in the simulation we have here with a simulator of autonomous driving. Concerning control and the feeling of control, the best solution would be to consider the previous experience of the drivers with advanced control systems or their preferences. For instance, could be someone like to have everything under control, and there are people that they don't have this need or this feeling. And this previous background will conditionate the interaction with autonomous vehicles control. Concerning environmental sustainability inside the group of social benefits, this level is the belief autonomous vehicles will be environmentally friendly, and this was one of the more identified potential social benefits, and it was well perceived by men and women. In this case, women rating these benefits higher than men. With a few exceptions, the car industry has only considered male models for designing the safety system of the car. So how we should contribute to this situation? First, by applying safety standards based on anthropometric women databases, including different sizes and pregnant women. Second, considering different uses and environments and further physiological differences such as driving styles, reaction times, preferences, stress, or workload levels. This is already happening in conventional cars, and this type of problems could be increased in new autonomous vehicles because, for instance, many technologies to monitor and interpret passengers' state are created by artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms, and actually they contain significant gender and ethnic bias. Therefore, researchers need to understand how gender and ethnicity operate within the context of their algorithms in order to enhance or at least not reinforce the social inequalities. The aim of the guidelines developed in the framework of the DIAMOND project is to heighten awareness, identify key points and strategic lines for women fair development of autonomous vehicles. The guide has 3 blocks, begins with some basic definition. The second block proposes some guidelines and recommendations. And the third block lists different tools and methodologies that may be useful to continue progressing in fairness and equality. Although it covers only a tiny part of all what is going on on this field of autonomous vehicles, for those only familiar with the automotive sector will benefit of incorporating a human-centered approach, stressing women needs and perceptions. Equally, for those absolutely new in the field of human equality and fairness, you will discover the potential of applying the concepts of equality and fairness in such a challenging technological field. And in any case, we hope you find fresh ideas and concepts that may be applied to your work, gaining a wider vision and contributing to a fair and inclusive autonomous vehicles. So if you want to change it, let's make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ricard. Now I keenly ask all the speakers to switch on your camera, because we have some questions and some discussions. We have 15 minutes to address it. Can you please, Ricard, switch off your presentation mode, the sharing of your screen? Okay, perfect. Okay, so fortunately we have a question per each speaker, and 2 minutes per each one. Okay, please be very, very concise in your answers. Sofia, there is one question for you. Can you explain a better more the methodology to assess the perceptions on public transport and autonomous vehicles per gender? What was the methodology to assess these perceptions?
Okay, so we worked with differences in the means. So we have used parametric and non-parametric. Since we had enough information per gender, we have used t-tests there. And for the intersectional, we had to use non-parametric because in older women we didn't have enough information. So there we used the Kruskal-Wallis test.
Great, great, Sofia. Thanks very much. A question for Cristian and Juan. Could you summarize the deep reasons of differences between women and men mobility patterns? Why do you think that there are deep reasons in these differences of mobility patterns between women and men? What have we different to conduct different mobility patterns? Cristian or Juan?
Juan,
Yes.
can you?
Yes, thank you, Francisco. I think that this question is a good question. Yes, we found some difference between the reason for these stops or the most shows for travel with dependents, and maybe in the paper is better explained, but these reasons are related to depend to the mode of choice that the person is using, and I think is that, yes.
Perhaps some social cultures, no? In the current society, cultures can be the deep reasons of these differences in patterns.
Maybe, but in our research, we cannot state this like of conclusion because the difference between the region are not significant. The mobility patterns between the region, I think that are similar. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Juan. Andrea, how do you think that ghettos for specific profiles of persons can affect gender fairness? For example, you have talked about specific areas living there, specific kind of profiles of persons. How can these areas, usual living specific profiles of persons, can affect on the gender fairness in a positive way or negative way? I think that this is the meaning of the question. It's good to allocate persons belonging to a profile in specific areas, or it would be better to merge all of them in an homogeneous way? No, we cannot hear you, Andrea. Andrea, can you switch on your micro? Okay, you have problem. Okay, don't worry. We can go to to the next question, Ricard, about your presentation. How would you explain the acceptance paradox about autonomous driving? Because women who are more interested in autonomous driving are less are persons who are accepting less this technology. How would you explain this? And then I give the floor to Hilda. Okay.
I will say that women are not so used to the technology, so the level of trust of new technology is lower. They normally they have on the contrary they value or they rate aspects like social benefits of the autonomous vehicle. They value them higher, thinking, for instance, in the environmentally friendly or the interaction with other users of the road. But of course, there is also a history in the car industry that they are not woman friendly in the sense that, for instance, in the case of safety, the dummies, the crash dummies are based on a male body, and although there are initiatives like EVA of Volvo that was published in 2019, and they were studying these differences and the different type of injuries gained in an accident by women and men, but is something that is not generalized in the industry. So there is a history of unfairness. There is a reluctance to use technology, or a traditionally situation where women are not common with the technology. On the contrary, there are some perceptions that the benefits could be higher, but there is this contradiction.
Okay, thanks, Ricard. Do you want to add something, Hilda, to the question? No, again, we cannot hear you. Sorry, switch on your micro. I don't know why you cannot speak. Okay, now, we can hear you.
Thank you for very interesting presentations. And I think what strikes me is that, I mean, some of you are, we are divided somehow on the quantitative methodologies and the more qualitative methodologies, and we all want to make a change happen, right? And I was just wondering, how can we perhaps work up more combined methodologies? That's one issue, because I mean, some people will be convinced by numbers and figures, but many people don't care, and they are much more influenced about what they see on the YouTubes and all that. So I mean, there is a kind of, you know, cultural perceptions and all that. How do we include that in modeling and so forth? And I think there's another thing which could be discussed more, is how we see change. Because do we see change as some improvements within the existing system, or do we see change as, you know, a challenge to the existing system? Because what I see in the car production sector is that they want more of the same, basically. Basically, they want more of the same, and I don't think that the revolution or the more fundamental changes will come from the production side. It must come from policies or people, researchers, experts, common people, whatever.
Yeah. Hilda, talking about this, you have a specific question, an additional question about this, because one attendee was asking about a historical and comparative analysis about the commercial images that these videos, these YouTube videos are showing as realities, as potential realities. So the attendee was asking, and this question was addressed to you, if you think that to conduct a comparative analysis of these commercial images suggested by these YouTube videos would be interesting to produce this change. Do you think so?
I think it's more, you know, a first step of revealing what's going on really, also among in the production sector. And this was really, as I said, the impulse was all these optimistic narratives that are around about all what the autonomous cars and electric cars will bring about. But many of us live in cities where electric cars are already there, but they are taking up a lot of space, and you know, it's for the higher middle class, etc., etc. So I mean, it's a starting point for addressing some of the critical questions here, because I think there is a kind of, you know, either you are in favor of the optimistic narratives, or otherwise you are just you know, in favor of bikes. And I think that we need to be more to have more sophisticated approaches really in order to deal with this. And what I also want is to be able to explain the citizens, for example, in Copenhagen, about what is at stake. And I know that they will not be, they are not so much mobilized by all the figures, and if they get very complicated, but they need narratives and perhaps also more simple models to deal with in order to imagine change.
Okay, thanks very much, Hilda. Andrea, can you speak now or not?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, okay. What about the ghettos? Can they affect positively or negatively?
Yeah,
the
obviously negatively. And I would add so again, if you look at the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we can look at this as an opportunity to rethink the way we have planned the city, I mean, in the last decades. I mean, we don't want services and inhabitants, city users segregated by region of the city. But if we look at the 15-minute city framework, we want all the neighborhood provided by, let's say, the same relevant services to get the citizen, like provided by, I mean, schools, I mean, facility for education, also for health, for transport and mobility. And again, if we look at I mean, for example, the bike sharing services, we don't need to have infrastructure, cycling infrastructure and docking station, but we need to also to have a change or a revolution in terms of the way people think that they could use the services, so a cultural step forward. And for example, if you look at Italy, the situation in Italy compared to the north part of Europe, there is a drastic difference in the way we are happy to use cycling or public transport or sustainable mobility. So I see the direction and make everything, let's say, mixed and mess up with a big change.
Okay, thanks very much, Andrea. And finally, I was a speaker and I had also a question. This is good. The question was, who will calculate the fairness score in your step-by-step model? So the fairness score is calculated by a toolbox, the DIAMOND toolbox, with the data introduced from the self-assessment and the algorithms calculating the weights after introducing the profile of the woman for which the transport provider is interested. So the fairness score is calculated by the toolbox, the DIAMOND toolbox, automatically, because there is a programmation inside the toolbox. And the second question is, will the data set for the different selected profiles accessible to stakeholders? Yes, in an aggregated way. The toolbox will have a public part where the data set in an aggregated way will be offered in a free way. Okay, I hope that these questions are appropriately solved. And well, we are in time. I want to thank very much and to give a virtual applause to all the speakers. Great job. Thank very much. I want to thank also people who have raised a question, and in general all people who has attended the session. And if you need these presentations, please contact with the organizers of the conference. And nothing more to add. Thanks very much, and I give the floor to Fuentes. Bye bye, guys. Thanks.